Our text is the epistle reading for this day from the 5th chapter of James. Be patient, my brethren, and establish your hearts, for the coming of your Lord draweth nigh. Now, in the closing verses, the apostle returns to the topic with which he began this epistle, the suffering of affliction, how to endure the fiery trial. The text simply assumes that the pilgrim people of God will be hard-pressed and persecuted in this world. Of course, that assumption is correct. This strange fact may come as a surprise to the superficial Christian, to the novice who is brand new to the faith, or to the countless thousands who blindly follow these blind religious leaders who promise them personal success, power, imposing wealth, and prestige. This, mind you, in the name of Christ, who said, "Deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me." The author of these words is the pastor of the church in Jerusalem. He is writing to his people who have been scattered hither and yon. James is well aware of the problems that plague his people, for they plague him too. James knows the world in which they live, for he lives in it also. James knows the trials that beset his people. He has been ambushed by them as well. Now, for the third time in 3 verses, our text today begins with this repeated encouragement. Be patient. Stand firm in your hearts, my brethren, for the coming of the Lord draweth nigh. Hold on by faith. Endure. Persevere. Hold out till the coming of your Lord. And from the verses that have gone before, we see how difficult a thing it is that James is asking. He knows that we will be marked and scarred in the battle for the faith. We live in a world which is run by the appealing spirit of pride, arrogance, haughtiness, and self-sufficiency. But we are called upon to walk humbly and go softly before our God. We live in a world that treats the law of God as though it were not a law at all. And we must bow before that law of God. We live in a world that boasts itself of what it shall do in the future. And we must allow for the Lord's will in our lives. We live in a world that ruthlessly and wantonly heaps up wealth beyond any conceivable need. And we try to wait for the harvest of the Lord as our reward. Now, needless to say, James understands that will be a very difficult thing to do. That you and I will be tempted to compromise our principles. That in a world where the faith obviously doesn't work, we will grow weary of fighting the good fight of faith. That we will collapse and cave in. We will melt before the seductive smiles and the threatening frowns of the world around us. That's why James encourages us. People, you endure tribulation by enduring. I can't make that complicated for you. 3 times he mentions the coming of the Lord. The Lord is at hand. The judge is at the door. Now this bothers some people that 2,000 years have passed since these words were written. 20 centuries have come and gone, and yet the end has not yet come. But people, you must remember that as far as you and I are concerned, these are the last times. Absolutely nothing else remains of all that the Bible has prophesied but Christ's second coming. The Old Testament prophecies all fulfilled. The great act of salvation completed. It is finished, Christ cried from the cross, and he sealed it with his rising again from the dead. All that he said he would do is done, except for this: I will come again. That's what makes these times the last time. And surely we are nearer the end this year than we were last year. Or turn it the other way around. With every passing day of my short life, and I don't even know how short, draws near the day that I will appear before my Maker. But no matter how you cut it for me, the Lord is always very near. Now in the first chapter, James warned us that when the going gets rough, we are tempted to lash out and complain against God as the source of our trouble. In the verses before us today, he warns us about lashing out against each other when the tribulations come. Grudge ye not one against another, brethren, for behold, the judge is at the door. Grudge not. That means don't groan against each other. Complain and berate one another as though somebody else were the cause of your trial. Please, people, all of us are prone to adversity. You cannot pin the problems of your life on only one individual alone. Who are you going to blame the snowfall on? Blame General Motors because your car won't start in this weather? Or the street crews because the roads are icy? Or lash out at your fellow passengers because the buses are running late? Take your family to task because an important appointment has been canceled? We are all subject to adversity. And the other thing, swear not, he says, neither by things in heaven nor by things on earth, neither by any kind of oath. Let your yea be yea and your nay be nay. You know how it is. Something goes wrong. How tempted we are to explode with an oath, a threat, a promise. And people, our words bind us. They are apt to become millstones about our necks. Saul rashly vowed, probably in an attempt to psych up the troops, that on the day of battle not a one of his soldiers should touch anything to eat. But by the end of the day, his fighting men were famished. They were dropping in their tracks. And what might have been a great victory turned out to be a dismal, shameful day of disgrace. You remember the rash vow of King Herod at the birthday party? The promise he made the striptease dancer Salome. And how he carried through on that oath to save face in front of the guys. Grudge not, and swear not. The Lord standeth before the door. He, not we, shall have the last word. But the text is very positive. Don't grudge and don't swear, but this is what you should do. Take, my brethren, the prophets who have spoken the word of the Lord for an example, who suffered and patiently endured affliction. Take the prophets, any prophet, all of the prophets, each and every one of the prophets without exception, suffered persecution. Now, if these, the spokesmen of God, called and commissioned of God, so highly privileged of God, endured adversity, what makes people like you and me think that we should be immune to it? Do you know their stories? How many times did not the people mutiny against Moses, the man who led them forth out of bondage in Egypt? Isaiah, the Old Testament prince of prophets, his story is writ large in letters of failure. The warm-hearted patriarch, Jeremiah, was given to proclaim an unpopular message to his people. And because of it, he was beaten, thrown into the stocks, imprisoned, and cast into a slimy cistern to sink away and drown. Or who that has ever heard the story could forget the love story of Hosea? How bitterly heartbreaking and unhappy it turned out. These are the prophets. You remember them today because they stood their ground, because they stood alone, because they refused to be bought off or to sell out for any price. And the many, many others in the Bible, countless of them, who compromised their faith for a few fleeting moments of fame, of pleasure, of success. You don't remember their names at all. Or if you can, you recall them with contempt. Just so, Jesus said. Blessed are ye when men shall revile you, and shall persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. You, my brethren, are in very good company. Hold on. One other example. Ye have heard of the patience of Job, and have seen the end of the Lord, that the Lord is pitiful and of tender mercy. Anybody who has ever suffered, which is everybody, can identify with the story of the man Job. Any one of you who has ever loved and lost, any one of you who has ever suffered because of loneliness or weariness or mental or emotional or physical pain, anybody who has ever cried out in anguish, "Why, O Lord?" Anyone who has ever harbored a desperate doubt, an unanswered question, any such person can identify with Job. You may recall the outline of the story. It began behind the scenes, as it were. The Lord Almighty made a bet with the devil about the man Job. God boasted before the angels and the demons, "Hast thou considered my boy Job, that there is none like him in all the earth?" And Satan caught on to that, threw it back in God's face and said, "Does Job serve you for nothing? Job loves you, God, because it pays to be pious. You have blessed that man hand over fist. If you were to take away the things that you have given him, he will curse you to his face. It sounds coarse, but remember that Satan is no fool. He knows that it is easy for us to remain faithful when things run smoothly in our lives. Oh boy, but when disaster comes all unexpectedly, when some treasure of ours is touched, a loved one, our health, our wealth, well, then we point the accusing finger at God, go on strike against God, even say that there is no God, or if there is a God, he isn't good. Well, which proves that Satan was right after all. That it really wasn't God whom we worshiped, but the gifts of God that meant most to us. Well, you're on. The Lord accepted the bet and allowed Satan to touch Job and everything that Job had, but not his life. And so it happened on one day, between dawn and dark, in a few short hours, that Job was utterly wiped out, reduced from wealth to ruin, like hammer blows in rapid succession. One after another, the messengers appeared at his tent door to tell him, the oxen and the asses have all been stolen by the Sabaeans and the cattlemen killed. The sheep, 7,000 of them in number, and all of the shepherds struck by lightning. All of the camels and the drovers have been carried away by the Chaldeans. And the fourth, a tornado. The house where your 10 sons and daughters were feasting, all destroyed, all dead. And lastly, Job was covered with a hideous and painful disease from the top of his head to the sole of his foot. His fellow citizens threw him out of town as a leper. Let him sit out there in the ash heap, scraping his sores with a Parcher. His wife came to him and said, why don't you curse God and kill yourself? What good has your religion ever done you or done me? His 3 friends appeared on the scene to throw dust into his eyes and to rub salt into his wounds. They accused Job of being a great sinner, and God is now punishing him. Job doesn't know what's gone on between God and Satan. All he knows is that he has been stripped of everything that has made life worth living. He doesn't know the reason why. But there he stands over the 10 fresh dug graves of his children and says, the Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And he answers his wife, oh, my dear, you're beginning to speak like one of the foolish women. Shall we receive good at the hand of the Lord and never any bad? We enjoyed the flowers of our youth, can't take the frost. We want God's sunshine, but have no nerve to take the storm. And to his 3 critics, Job answered, he knoweth the way that I take. And when he hath tried me, I shall come forth as gold. And again, though God slay me, yet will I trust him. And unforgettably again, I know that my Redeemer liveth, and that he shall stand at the latter day upon the earth. And though after my skin worms destroy this body, yet in my flesh shall I see God, whom mine eyes shall behold, and not another. In other words, Job hangs on The text calls it the patience of Job. However, people, by patience, do not think of some spineless sap sitting there passively taking it all. Job hurt, and he says so in some pretty rough language. Job does not timidly rap at heaven's door. He kicks at it with both his feet. Job does not merely fold his hands quietly in prayer. He shakes his fist at the heavens that belong to the Almighty. Job complains. Job curses the night in which he was conceived and the day in which he was born, and longs for the day of his death. Job tees off on those three critics of his. And if any of you people think that it is bad form for a Christian man to display emotion, great anger, fiercely and passionately to debate for the truth, oh, you would sure be offended by the book of Job. But he hangs on. And that to me is the loveliest picture in the Old Testament. Here's this guy sitting in the ash pile, bereft of family and friends, broken in body and spirit. His friends think he's rejected. He doesn't feel very good himself. And all the while the Lord Almighty is saying, have you considered my boy Job? He is my pride and my joy in all of the earth. And why? Because Job would not let go. He refused to break faith with his father. And you know the end of the Lord. The conclusion of the story. The reward that the Lord has reserved for those who hold fast to Him. At the close, God gives Job double of everything that he had ever lost. And there are people sitting here today who could tell you how the Lord does that. He made the lot of Job much better off than it ever was at the beginning. Because the Lord is very pitiful and of tender mercy. So, have patience, people. Stand fast in your heart, brethren. You can be a little marked and scarred. So were all of the prophets. So was Job. So was James. Every day that you and I live, we stand in need of a great deliverance. And by faith in God alone, we have deliverance in the great God of our salvation. Amen.